Hi, everyone. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book, McKenna Jordan, and I'm here today with Sara Blaedel and Abby Endler of Crime by the Book. I love doing these afternoon events with international authors. They're such a treat to host in the middle of the day, and I know a lot of you enjoy just taking a little break from your afternoon and joining us. So as always, if you have questions, don't be shy. You can put those in the live chat on YouTube or in the comments section on Facebook. And for more information about Sara, her books, or Abby and Crime by the Book, I'm putting a link in the comments right now. If you're inclined, we would love if you ordered books from us, but you can also find out more information about both of our guests at that link. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to bring on Sara here and get her introduced. Hi, Sara. How are you today?
Hello. Hi, I'm very good. And how are you?
I'm well, thank you. You're looking beautiful as always, and I'm so excited to have you and Abby chat about the books because I know you're also friends, and those are the best chats. We can just sit back and listen and feel like we're just kind of eavesdropping on a conversation. So it's going to be a treat. So Sara Blaedel is the author of the #1 international best-selling series featuring Detective Louise Rick. Her books are published in 38 countries. In 2020, Sara was voted Denmark's most popular novelist for the 5th time. She's also a recipient of the Golden Laurel, Denmark's most prestigious literary award. And she's here today to talk about her latest release, A Harmless Lie. We are also joined, as I said, by Abby Endler of Crime by the Book. Hi, Abby. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. I'm going to do a little just aside here and say also that we're so excited that you're going to be joining us for our event coming up in June 20th. So that's going to be pretty amazing.
Thank you. I'm so looking forward to it. That'll be my first in-person event that I've moderated in a long time. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
You and Riley Sager. So that's going to be super fun. As if they're not pals enough, we get to host them in person. So I can't wait to have you at the store and to do that.
Thank you.
Obviously, Abby Endler is the creator of Crime by the Book, a crime fiction review website and Instagram account. By day, she's a publicist for a division of Penguin Random House. Now, I'm going to leave it to you and Sara. I'll be back on in a little bit. If there are any issues, just say, McKenna, are you out there? And I'll come back. Otherwise, I'll be back on for questions. And for those of you watching, again, don't be shy. Put those questions in the comments and we'll get to them in a little bit. Thanks so much. See you guys in a little bit.
Thank you, McKenna.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Sara. How are you?
Happy.
It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for letting me join you for this virtual event to discuss your amazing new Louise Rick novel, A Harmless Lie, which just came out in the States this past week. I mean, I've known you for a very long time, and actually, this event is very fitting. I think we need to tell our kind of friendship origin story because way back in the day, I lived in Houston. I went to college in Houston, and Murder by the Book was my indie bookstore of choice. And one day, I saw that an author named Sara Blaedel was going to be coming through Houston on book tour for her new novel. And I bought a book. I was going to read the book in advance, and I was so excited to meet you. And then I got very sick the day of your event, and I wasn't able to make it. But I think I posted on Instagram how much I loved the book, and we connected. And now fast forward a whole bunch of years, and we are real life friends, and I am still such a huge fan of your work. And all of that is to say, I'm so excited to be joining you for this virtual event.
Thank you. But I just have to say that I think that you, and I really mean this, you were actually my first reader or fan of Louise Rick in the US. So we are going back. We are really going back.
Way back. We've come full circle.
And beside that, you are the person I know, and I mean, I live in Denmark. I'm sitting in the middle of Copenhagen, in the middle of Scandinavia, and you are the person that I know who knows most about Scandinavian crime. I am so fascinated about your commitment to Scandinavian crime. I know nobody who knows as much as you do. So, first of all, it's really an honor that you read my books, and it's an honor to have a reader who really knows so much about Scandinavian crime, being my first reader in the US.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor for me to get those kind words from you. And I hope you notice behind me, we can see right here, this is my Scandinavian crime fiction bookshelf. So this is an appropriate setting for this conversation. Thank you so much. And I'm just so excited to talk about this new book. I have pages and pages of questions for you. I absolutely loved it and truly think this is, I think, your best book that you've written in years. It's just excellent. And I'm so excited for American readers to finally get to explore this story. But I thought before we get into the book, let's kind of talk a little bit about you and kind of introduce you to people who might not be familiar with your work yet. So tell us about your origin story as a writer. What were you doing prior to becoming a writer, and how did you find your way into writing crime books?
But the most, not flattering thing to say about that is that I've never been dreaming of becoming a writer. And it was never in the card that I should end up writing books at all. I mean, not even one book, not even two, but absolutely not a series. And that is because I have dyslexia. When I was a child, it was more than it is now. I've been written so many words and I've been reading so many books, but I'm still struggling with it. But you can imagine that having dyslexia as a child, then reading and writing is not one of your topic things to do. Not one of your favorite things to do. So the reason that I became a reader was because of mystery books for children. I was reading Enid Blyton's The Famous Five and Nancy Drew and all these kind of mysteries for children. And the reason I got so much into it was because of in a mystery for children, then the plot is not super hard-paced, but still there is a mystery and you have to be in it and you're curious to find out what's going on. And that motor was my most motivation for reading. And I think it was very, very clever of my mom to see if she could trick me into that, then maybe I will learn to love reading. And that was exactly what happened. And that was also, I think, at the time where I started telling myself stories, just coming up with stories. We lived very, very close to the forest, and you have no idea of how many bodies that have been buried in that forest. I mean, every Sunday when tourists or just visitors came to the forest, I was running. I thought I was sneaking behind them. Probably they could see me all the way, but I thought that, whoa, I have to see where do they have a body in the trunk of the car? What are they going to do? Is it silver? What have they stolen? All these kind of strange things. I'm an only child, so maybe that's the reason that I have to come up with stories. But in my imagination, I was one of the children from these mystery books. And I think being able to tell yourself a story, I created a space in my head where if I felt alone as a child, if I was stressed as an adult, I created this space to go in and tell myself a story. And that was actually what happened. I was working, I've been working as a journalist for many years before I started writing full time. And at one point I was working on a TV production company, and we were it was so stressful. People were yelling and shouting, deadlines coming up all the time. And I realized that I do not say that to anyone because it's not a totally fair trick. But I just cut everything off and I start telling myself a story. I didn't close my eyes, so they couldn't see that I was not listening. But then I start telling myself a story. And that was just starting up with, what if a journalist in Copenhagen had a story he was working on that was so dangerous, so he got himself killed and blah, blah, blah. And I realized, and that went on for months, I just for fun. And I realized that I had a hard time. Imagine how could I make the setting around that story if I didn't know the police station, the headquarters in Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And I've never been arrested. I've never been arrested for murder. Thank God for that.
Thank goodness.
But also that, therefore, it was very difficult for me to to see how it looked inside the homicide department in Copenhagen. So in one of my crazy days, I wrote an old school letter to the former chief of the homicide department here in Copenhagen, asking him, I mean, all the everyday details. Abby, you have been in Copenhagen several times. You know that everyone here is driving around by bike. The bikes all over. I want to know if they put them in front of the police station or in the back. I mean, all the details that is obvious if you work there. So I wrote an old school letter to the chief of the homicide department, asking him if it was possible for me to have a chat with him, to come in and visit. And I mean, it was. I didn't think that through. I mean, it was just a thing that I'm trying to do. But what happened was that he called me the next day and say, "Oh, a book? Yes, that is very exciting. Why don't you come in and have a cup of coffee?" And in that second, I mean, everything changes for being just a space in my head, just fun, just for my own sake, just for me, to actually turning into being research for a book. And that was the first Louise Rick novel.
That's amazing.
That was, I mean, I could see Louise Rick so clearly to begin with. She was just there. I know her name. I knew exactly what she looked like. In a very short period, I thought that she should be a journalist like myself, because it would just make everything easier. But then I thought, oh no, then I have no access for the homicide department. So I was so into the story and so curious. But at that point, I've never ever been writing fiction before. As a journalist, I try to stick very carefully to facts and to tell what people actually told me. I mean, this going with my pure fantasy, my imagination, it was totally new.
Wow.
And still, maybe that is because of my dyslexia, I don't know, but maybe it is. I see it in pictures. I mean, when I tell myself a story, it's like a kind of a movie starting in my head, and then I'm just the one who put it down on my computer.
Amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, I think, because obviously I am a huge reader, but I'm not a writer. I don't have these ideas for new stories and stuff. So it's so fascinating to me to hear from someone like yourself, where you describe, seeing Louise as this complete person, that she sort of popped into your head and you got to know her. It's all very amazing to me. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about who Louise is, in case there are people watching who are not familiar with her. What is she like?
To begin with, I placed her in the homicide department in Copenhagen, and she's there for my first six books. Yes, and when I met her for the first time in my head, I had a very, very clear idea of, she was what you say in America, she was a tough cookie.
Yeah.
And I had the feeling that I could see her being, I mean, just on top of everything. And she was very professional, and she was very, maybe not super hard-boiled at the same. I mean, of course she had feelings also, but I mean, very professional and very committed to her work. And then I started writing on my first novel. As I said before, I've never had any experience writing fiction before. So I prepared, and I have put down not a full storyline, but I've had my ideas, and I started the story where she was out in the middle of the night. There was a body found in the park in Copenhagen, and it was a young girl, and she talked with the young girl's parents over the night, and then she was planning to go in for a briefing the next morning at the police station. And when she stands in her kitchen that morning, she got a flashback to the first time ever when she had to go out and tell a woman that her boyfriend was attacked on the street and he died. And that flashback reminded her of all the sorrow that overwhelmed her. And I mean, she was so hit by the woman's feelings. So she had a breakdown. And I mean, I did not plan that.
Yeah.
I did not have any idea of why that flashback came up.
Yeah.
And after I've been reading, I mean, this happened on page number 4 or 5 or 6. I mean, in the beginning of my very, very first novel.
Yeah.
And I had, oh, Sarah, that was the worst start ever. You created a protagonist, and then you give her a breakdown
Yeah.
in the beginning of the book. Really not good. And of course, I know that I could just delete all of it. But at the same time, I had the feeling that would be wrong.
Yeah.
She is a human being. I mean, she had feelings. Maybe this was not the proudest moment of her career,
Yeah.
but I decided to let it be in the book. But before I hand it over to my editor, I talked to the former chief of the homicide department and tell him about. I told him about it, and I said, "What if this happened?" And I mean that it was the very first case, and she's coming out there, being in that situation. He just looked at me, and I mean, he is one of the coolest police officers ever. He is so professional. I've been in this for a lifetime. He just looked at me and said, "But Sarah, if she did not react like that, then she'll never have a job in my department. If she had no empathy at all, then then she'll never be a good investigator." And I was like, yes. Because it came to me, and I mean, we had to work. I mean, we had to work with it. I gave her help to deal with these issues.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a part of her, and she is still a tough cookie. I mean, she is still super professional, but she is also just a human being.
Yeah.
And of course, she react. I mean, all the feelings, even that I have never been in that situation, came from me. I mean, how would I react if I stand in that position? How could I deal with telling another person that that the man she loved and lived with died after a brutal attack on the street? I would react too.
Yeah.
But I'm a police officer.
But it's, this is something that I've always loved about your book so much, because you do have these amazing mysteries for readers to solve, and you have a mystery like that in the new book, but there's so much humanity in your characters that I've always absolutely loved. I feel like your characters are these sorts of characters that I wish I could get to know them in real life, because I just love spending time with them and I relate to them. And I feel like they're real people who really come to life for the reader. And I think that's kind of a perfect segue into talking about the new book, because in your new novel, A Harmless Lie, you do something a little bit different with the story. Past novels are much more about Louise's work as a police officer. This new book is much more about Louise's personal life. And I wonder if you could, first of all, just describe the plot of A Harmless Lie. What's going on when this book opens?
You're totally right, and just to make clear that she is not always all over her feelings. She is always very professional. Now it sounds like she's all the time.
No, she's a good balance of professional, but a real person.
And the reason that I do that, I will come back again. But the reason is, if she did not have a private life, and if she was not a real person, then you could fire her and put a new one instead of her. So I feel that it is important that she have a private commitment to the story and to herself and to the book. Otherwise, she could just be replaced.
Yeah.
But for 9 Louise Rick novels, she have been on the homicide department. She's been very, very cool investigator. She's been in charge of the missing persons department in Copenhagen also. And after book number 9, and this is a little bit weird, but I won in Denmark the Golden Laurel, which is a very prestigious literary award. And after that, I put Louise Rick to sleep. My publisher did not feel that was the best idea ever. but for me, it was the right moment, because I have been written a trilogy, the Family Secrets trilogy, that is placed in the US, actually in Racine, Wisconsin. And the reason that I wanted to write that trilogy was because my parents passed away 8 years ago now, and I had a new story coming in my head about a funeral home and undertaker's daughter, and I have to go with the stories that pop up in my head. I mean, it's not like just continuing because something is extremely successful. I have to go with the stories that make sense for me to write. And the trilogy about Ilka is not. It is suspense, but it's not crime fiction. But the suspense is in between the relations and the choices we made and the consequences that will give other people also, for example, in the family. And when I was finishing that trilogy, I lived in New York at that time. And when I was finishing the third book, an idea came up in my head about Louise Rick, because to be totally honest, and I really mean that can sound a little bit weird now that we know that I'm continuing the Louise Rick series. But at that time, I wasn't sure that I will be writing about her again. I wasn't sure that I will pick up this series again if I did not get the right entry to the story.
Yeah.
It has to be not just because it was a success. I mean, that could be the easy way in, but for me, it was more like, if there is a really good reason to write one more book, then I'll do it. But if not, then come up with something else. But then the idea for A Harmless Lie came, and I want to put Louise in the situation that was totally different from the earlier books, because I want to put her in as a private person, a person that is involved in this crime or this story because of her family and because of her relations to her family.
Yeah.
So for the first time, Louise Rick is not in the story as a police officer. She is not investigating anything. She is there because of her brother and her sister-in-law. And I feel that in this story, she had so much to lose.
She does, yeah.
She had also so much to struggle with and deal with, both in her private life, but also police-wise, also professional, because she had to fight to find out what's going on. Very briefly, she is, where the story starts, she is on a beach in Thailand, heartbroken, misery, everything is going totally wrong for her. And I mean, that does not sound like Louise Rick at all. I mean, normally she had pretty much under control. She is not very moody normally.
No,
I feel
no,
she's not into her feelings all the time. But here there is a specific reason that things are not going very well for her. And in that situation, also she got a call from Denmark, from her father, telling her that her brother Mikkel tried to commit suicide back home in Denmark, and she had to rush home because we will not know if he survives it. So I mean, as a writer, it's for me very interesting, and I think a lot of writers will agree with that, to give your protagonist or your characters, you can give them wonderful things. I mean, I gave Louise Rick a very nice boyfriend.
You really did.
I did, and he proposed to her. I sent them on a leave on 6 months, traveling around the world. She had a wonderful foster son. I mean, I gave her, and I gave her a brilliant job as a leader of the homicide department in Copenhagen. So I felt that I placed her in a very nice situation if I didn't want to bring her back in my books again.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of giving your characters and your protagonists a lot of things is that you can take them away again. So I did. But it is interesting for me to see a character that I've spent so many years writing about and being with, and I know her very, very well, in a situation that is also totally new for me, because then to discover her again, or rediscover her, I don't know what it's called, but I mean, I have to find her again in a new situation.
Yeah.
And here, of course, when she comes back to Denmark, she rushes back to Denmark. and know that the reason that Mikkel, her brother, his wife left him. She just disappeared without any word, without any explanation. She just left him back home with the 2 children. And earlier in the marriage, she had left him once before. And I mean, he couldn't bear it. He couldn't bear to be alone again. He couldn't bear having the responsibility for these 2 children. So he decided that he wasn't good enough. He wasn't strong enough to do that.
Yeah.
And that situation is tough. And I would be heartbroken if some of my closest, the people that I love most, would be in the situation where they have no other way to turn.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, checking out.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that I want to see Louise Rick deal with. And of course, Abby, you and I know that maybe his wife didn't leave. Maybe there was another reason.
Absolutely. And, something you just mentioned was so interesting to me, because I was curious to know, writing a story that is so focused on the personal lives of Louise and of the people around her, did you feel like you were discovering new things about characters you've been writing about for many books now in this story?
Absolutely. Yeah. And absolutely. And not just Louise Rick, because I mean, it is obvious that my idea with her is to see her in a very, very vulnerable situation, and hopefully readers are not thinking, oh, this is so sad. It is not. She will come. She will return, and she'll do it very well. So don't be afraid. She is still a tough cookie, but in a new way. But also people around her. Yeah. I mean, to seeing. Putting people in situations where they have to survive, mentally and psychological. Yeah. It's very interesting. I mean, for example, I could take a lot of things. Louise Rick's parents lived in the exact same house in Valsø, in the middle of Sjælland, 45 minutes, almost an hour drive from Copenhagen, in the exact same house where I grew up. She went to the exact same school where I went. Wow. And Harmless Lie is placed, I mean, this is my teenage year. Yeah. Was exactly on the same place as this story take place. And I could feel, I mean, it was my mother coming in worst case and in worst scenarios where you are where you're totally down, where you have no energy, no nothing. Then my mom came with chili con carne in a plastic pot or something like that, and felt that it solved something, and very often it does. I mean, the way that people are backing up on you, I mean, help you in the way that feels most natural. Yeah, that came so impulsive. Like if it was my mom, she would have reacted just like that. And
I love that. Does that mean that, do you have someone in your life who is your Camilla? Because that is one of my favorite. There's this amazing friendship between Louise and a journalist, actually, much like you were. And that is one of my favorite aspects of this book, but also of the whole series, really, is just this incredible friendship between these two very independent and strong women who are able to lean on one another, when life happens. Do you have someone in your life like that?
I do. I actually have two Camillas in my life. They are not journalists, but they are my closest friends. Gitte, I have known Gitte since I was 3. We grew up together. We went to school together. We've been together. We've been in each other's best friends for more than 50 years. Yeah. And Christina, I've known her as my other best friend since I was 10. And being, so much in each other's lives. So you are a witness. They are witness to my life. I mean, we can it just need one word and we will know exactly what we're talking about. That is one thing. But another thing about being best friends like that for life is also, Abby, we will we will be way over that point where it's about telling each other that, oh, you are so good at this, or oh, you're looking good, or oh, this fits you, or you're doing well, you do. I mean, all these flattering things that we're trying to compliment people we know and like, because we like them and we want them to know that we like them. But with my really close friends, it's more like, hey, I mean, you look like you look tired. You look like you're working too much. Are there something I can do for you? Can I? I mean, we are way beyond just trying to be very nice, because I love them. I will travel on the other side of the earth to pick them up if something happened to them. I mean, they would do the same for me. They did when my parents passed away. They both stood there and grabbed me. We are way beyond the thing where it's just about having a nice glass of wine and telling each other how wonderful everything is. And that is the point that is really interesting, I feel, with Camilla and Louise. They are beyond that. They are there because, I mean, everything could happen and they will still be there. And that is also, for me, very fascinating to write about, because I can put them in situations where I don't feel that it needs to be flattering for them to be. I mean, one of the things is that having two strong characters in this book, it's two strong female characters. It's not just to show two strong women. It's also, instead of having a mirror, you can see how Louise react on something Camilla do. And that will tell you a lot about Louise, and the other way around. So it's not just a supplement, but it's a way to show the characters.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we learn about them not just on their own, but through the way they interact with one another and how they engage with one another. And it's an amazing, amazing facet of this series. And I think that the nice thing is, because this book is different from the previous books in the series, when I was reading this, I felt like, anyone could pick this book up and feel like they're getting a new introduction to Louise and to Camilla, because the story it's just a different kind of story in a lot of ways, which I think was very clever on your part too, because obviously, when you're writing a long running series, it can be tricky for people to figure out where can they get in. But I think this book is a perfect place for people to meet these characters. And I do want to mention, because we've talked a lot about, the personal life aspect of this story, there is also an amazing mystery going on in this story as well. There's this body that's discovered that seems like it might have a connection to this school trip years ago that went totally wrong. Can you tell us what was kind of the inspiration, the spark behind this school trip gone wrong?
And actually the idea in Denmark, almost all of us are going on a school trip when we are around 13 or so. Then we're going a week away, and a lot of us is going to Bornholm, which is a small island between Denmark and Sweden, very close to Sweden. And the first time you are away, I mean, with your friends and your parents not there, only the teachers, and it's a little bit, it's edgy, and there are other school classes, and you will meet other girls or boys. So, I mean, it's just exciting, and all of us is having we can connect with these kind of schools. In Denmark, we all know what it is. You will know the same. I mean, we all remember. Do you have the same kind of school trips in?
I think so. I went to a private school. I was homeschooled, and then I went to a private school. So I don't think I had the typical kind of American experience of schooling. I don't know that we have the exact same thing that you guys do. We definitely have field trips, but based on what I was reading in this book, I think this might be a little more involved than what we usually do.
But here it is. I mean, you go. Oh, it's 4 or 5 days, and you go with maybe 2 teachers from your school, and then you're living at a hostel where maybe 4, 5, 6 girls are living in the same room, and when I started working on that, I was out having an event, and at the end of my event, the audience was asking, will there be more Louise Rick books? And I said, yeah, I think so. I'm thinking about a school trip. And after the event, a woman came up to me, and it turns out that she actually was one of my own old friends from my school class. And she said, oh, Sara, that is so exciting. Do you remember when we jumped out the window to meet these local boys? And I was like, no. And I was like, no, you did not invite me. They jumped out. That's my dog. They did not invite me to jump out any window. So, but of course, it started up a lot of thoughts, and I remember the feeling of being, I mean, out on our own for the very first time, and all these local interesting guys, boys we met. But the idea to the school trip plot started up earlier in my book, The Stolen Angel, is it called in the US? Yeah. Because there is a character called Mona, and Mona she's very sensitive when people are reported missing, you know, when the news show up and a missing person is, what do you call it? Yeah. When you're looking for a missing person. And then I talked to a doctor, a professor at a mental hospital here in Denmark, asking them, will it be possible if you have a kind of a trauma from your childhood or from your youth, that you can, of course you can have it with the rest of your life, but will it be possible that you can react on these kind of things when these kind of stories popped up, if something happened? And she said, oh yes, of course. And I asked her, how will you handle it? She said, okay, maybe they just show up at the mental hospital, and we know them, of course, because they will come over and over, and they are one of our regular, or what you can call it. And sometimes it's enough just to have a cup of tea and sit and chat, and they feel good again. Otherwise, they have to stay with us. And that was exactly Mona. And then back then, I mean, that book came out 10 years ago, or 8 years ago. I was so curious. So back then, I decided that I had to write, just for me, just for myself, her story, to find out what happened. Why will she react like that? And I know, and this sounds crazy, I know that I created her, so I should know why she reacts like that. But it's not like that always. I mean, sometimes characters shows up and behave in a specific way, and then I had to find out why. So I created Mona's story long ago. And when I lived in New York, and when I got the idea that I wanted to bring back Louise Rick, but in another way, in a new setting, then I decided that I want to use Mona because it makes a lot of sense for me to use this old school trip, because I also knew that I want to write about adult women that has something in common that now haunts them, that now have a huge impact on them. Then I had to find out what could it be, and they could have been on the same school trip, all of them. And the thing is, in A Harmless Lie, that the body, as you mentioned, is found many years ago in 95. They went on a school trip, a school in Osted went on a school trip to Bornholm. And there was, of course, a full school class, and there were four girls hanging out together. And one of them went missing. No, there were five. No, one of them went missing. And she never turns up. I mean, they didn't find her body. They didn't find any sign of her. They didn't know if she was kidnapped, if she decided to disappear by herself, or whatever. What happened? Her body was never found. She was never found. Until now, when Louise Rick is coming back from Thailand, she hears that they found the body on Bornholm. And it turns out that Mikkel, Louise's brother, married to Trine, who disappeared, went on the same school trip. So this started up, finding this body started up a lot of things here. People are disappearing one by one. With not having Louise as an investigator, and having, because Abby, you know so much about police work, so you'll know that one of the first persons the police would look at is Mikkel, the husband to Trine who disappeared. That's a fact. That is not something I come up with. That's a fact. So Louise had to find out what happened. And one of the things, besides, being in a situation that is so weird because it involves her own brother, but one of the things that I find very fascinating is even people you know very well, people you love, the closest people you have in your life, you don't know exactly what happened.
Yeah.
You don't know exactly what he did, what happened, what went on that day that Trine disappeared. And that is so, I feel that is so exciting.
Oh, it's so great. And I love the way in this book you weave together these different mysteries. It's just so good. And I could keep talking to you for hours here, but we are actually 40 minutes into our conversation already. And I know that we have some audience questions that I think McKenna is going to help ask. Thank you, McKenna.
Hi, sure. Yeah, of course. I could sit back and just listen as well. But so we do have a couple questions. So one of them was, Trisha was wondering, what's the response from your book rep or editor when you submit a manuscript that differs so much from what has made you successful?
That is a very, very great question. So they think about when I started up under the series about Ilka, the trilogy. That is very different.
Probably that, yeah.
I think that's about when the question appeared.
Yeah, but the thing is, to be totally honest, and that is not flattering when you look at me, but to be totally honest, people were like, "Why don't you just read another Louise Rick? We don't want to know anything about funeral homes and anything about." But after that, but that's true. But after that, it turns out that when my readers get to know Ilka and the Family Secret trilogy and the story, they were so much into it. So now, because the trilogy is finished over and out, they were, when can we read more about Ilka? So it took a little while to prove that she was also worth spending time with. But the truth is that some of them, not a lot, but a few, was actually a little bit angry with me because I didn't write about Louise Rick. And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was the author." But it was a compliment. So I took it as a compliment, and people start loving Ilka also.
You know, something I admire, if I can just chime in, something I admire, Sara, is that you do follow like what you're passionate about, you know, like you're not going to just, the easiest thing would have just been to keep writing Louise, but you knew creatively you wanted to pursue something different and explore something different. I think that's super admirable.
That's how it works in my head.
Yeah.
Otherwise, maybe it would be boring for me. And if I get bored, probably my readers will get bored as well.
Sure. So a question for both of you, because obviously, Abby, you're such a voracious reader as well. What books are on your nightstand?
Abby,
so what's next up in your to be read pile?
Oh my gosh. Well, I actually have a couple books, which I need to, my audience on Instagram very kindly just did a poll to help me figure out what to read next. So I can actually tell you 3 books that I need to tally up the votes and see which one won. For me right now, Ragnar Jonasson, a great Icelandic crime writer, has a standalone novel coming out this spring called Outside. That's one that's on my list at the moment. A novel called Breathless by Amy McCullough, which is coming out in May. It's sort of a thriller set on a mountain. So it's like an outdoorsy, isolated location thriller. And then a title that I just recently purchased, Woman on the Edge by Samantha Bailey, which is a psychological thriller that's available now.
I also have Ragnar Jonasson on my nightstand, and a new one from Yrsa Sigurðardóttir. So I'm going totally Icelandic.
I love it.
Yeah. And then I have another one. It's not it's not on my nightstand yet, but I ordered it because it will be published in Denmark actually tomorrow. It's the new Åsa Larsson, the Swedish Åsa Larsson, and I'm a huge fan of Åsa. And it's been a long, years and years ago since she published the latest one of Rebecca Martinson, and she had a new one coming out, so I'm so excited.
That is super exciting. I am jealous because I'm a big fan of that series too, but I have to wait for the
Almost
English translation.
so you can read it in Swedish.
So we had another question pop up that's related to reading. Sara, how do you read other books while writing your book and not get confused?
Very good question. Earlier on, I would say it had not any kind of impact on me when I was reading crime novel while I was writing, but I do not have it like that anymore. I had a little bit more difficult reading crime novels when I'm doing my first draft of a book. When I have my story is so fresh in my head and I'm not totally sure if I can handle all the information and put them down in the right spot and in the right way, then it's more difficult. And then now you will drop dead laughing, because then I'm going more into, I will not say romantic, but historical novels or Hotel Portofino and all these kind of things that is, totally different from what I'm writing. But then at some point, but then I listen. Audiobooks. It's easier for me to have crime fiction as an audiobook when I'm writing, instead of reading it as a paper book. But I'm working on a new Louise Rick novel right now, and I'm in the middle of the first draft, and the story is in my head all the time. Yeah. It's going on all the time. So it is a little bit now. I'm reading also a totally different book, but we have a very good crime fiction author in Denmark called Jesper Stein, and now he skipped crime novel. I don't know if it's a thing for forever, but he just published last week a book about being sober. He's been an alcoholic, and it's a totally honest and very, very beautiful written book about being sober.
Wow.
Totally different, extremely good.
Okay. And that's not going to interfere with your Louise Rick writing at all.
No, she's just sipping a little bit.
Yeah.
No.
So the last question I have is, what writers have had the greatest influence on you?
I will say a lot of really brilliant writers, and this is not just too flattering the American authors, but I'm a huge Michael Connelly fan. I'm a huge Patricia Cornwell fan, and a huge Karen Slaughter fan. I could continue mentioning a lot of names, but for me, when I start reading Michael Connelly and the Harry Bosch series, it was very much about the details, the research, the real life police work. And Patricia Cornwell, of course, it was the forensic. And doing the real research, putting that into the stories, that was extremely inspiring for me. But I do not have, I'm not trying to be them. I'm not trying to put my stories close. And it's not like they have that kind of impact on me. But just to see how well written and well researched and plots. I'm a sucker for good crime fiction plots. So that is very, it keep me on my toe, if you can say so. That they are so good. That tons of brilliant writers, and that is inspiring every day, because it reminds me of try to do my best, because it is such a pleasure to read a very well-written crime novel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Connolly is just one of the most consistent out there too, with just quality of writing and delivering every time. So I totally understand that. Okay, I think that does it. That's all our questions. That's about all the time we have. I do want to mention for those of you watching, if you're not already following Abby on Instagram at Crime by the Book, she has an amazing resource there, interviews with authors, reviews. I'm always blown away by the amount of effort and energy and time and content that she puts out there. So we love doing these events with her. She's one of the smartest readers that I know of. Her recommendations are always gold. So make sure to check out Crime by the Book. And then A Harmless Lie is now out. Thank you again, Sara, for joining us. And thanks to everyone for watching. I hope everyone has a great day, and looking forward to seeing you, Abby, in person in June.
I think I
Thank
would
you
be
so
there.
much.
It sounds amazing.
You should come.
Come, Sara, you're invited.
Okay, I'm going to sign us all off. Have a great afternoon. Thank you
Thank you
both
both
again.
of you for having this event with me. Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.